going to also report to my computer here, letting some more folks in. All right, just good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sergeant Jules Sohn. I'm the president of the LAP's newest affinity group, official affinity group, LACOPS, the Los Angeles County Officers Pride Society. We're doing a career development Zoom. And so please note that we are recording this for folks who are unable to attend. I know this was kind of a short notice, but we're very grateful to have Commander Shannon Paulson, who is going to give us different interview tips, especially given that the sergeant's interviews are coming. And so if you have any questions, what we ask is that you stay on mute. And any questions that you have, please feel free to drop it in the chat. I will be monitoring them. But with that, I will hand the floor to Commander Shannon Paulson. Commander?
Cool, thank you. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm gonna be up front. I don't have any sexy PowerPoint or anything to show you. I'm just gonna run through just some suggestions for you. Answer some of the questions that I frequently get, some of which sometimes people are hesitant to ask. I'll give you a general idea of kind of the areas or subjects that the questions will come from, that'll give you some ideas on kind of the grab bag of personal experiences, professional experiences that you should have in mind and ready to produce an answer to a question. My suggestions for you on how to answer some of these questions, and so we'll go through it kind of that way. First of all, I frequently will get a question with people asking me what they think they should wear, and is there kind of unwritten guidelines or what judgments will be passed. I will tell you, and obviously some of that will come down to, there might be some command officers out there that sit on these interview boards who have a very specific opinion of that. So I can't necessarily give you the definitive, but there is no rule for that. My guidance to you would be wear what you are most comfortable in. I have done promotional interviews. I have done them in business suits. I will tell you most recently and up to and including my interview for commander, I wore my uniform. That's just my personal opinion. I'm very comfortable in it, and you're going to perform in the manner in which you're most comfortable. And the bottom line is we're police officers, and our basic function is law enforcement. And this is the uniform of law enforcement, and I think we should be proud of it. That is just my personal opinion. I'm not telling you should wear your uniform. I'm not telling you I would judge you down or grade you down in any way for wearing a uniform. You should wear what you are most comfortable in, what you believe you can sit in that interview panel and be the most confident and perform to your best. Okay. Make sure whatever you're wearing, you look sharp. If you're going to wear a suit, I would not wear, a purple suit. I would wear an appropriate business, generally considered navy blue or black, somewhat conservative in your tie or other accoutrement. Ladies, make sure your makeup is conservative, and all that. This is a professional environment. So that's what I will say regarding what you're going to be wearing. And I realize for you guys at the sergeant rank, this is your first civil service promotion outside of likely having your hiring period. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. We're not doing these interviews are going to be in person, or are they going to be via Zoom? If somebody can let me know.
Sergeant Kwan, are you able to answer that question regarding in person, or is there still an option for Zoom? I know with the lieutenants' interviews, they were in person.
Okay. So then presuming we are now all in person, and just to kind of give you an idea of how it's going to work, again, understanding this is for many of you, probably your first civil service promotional exam. You're going to be called down to personnel, which is down here at on East Temple, over beyond Alameda. I will tell you, show up ahead of time. You know, it's a bitch to find parking. Let's just be honest. So, you know, don't rush yourself. Give yourself plenty of time to find parking, or, you know, if you work in one of the stations around here, maybe somebody can drop you off so you don't even have to worry about that. But give yourself plenty of time so you're not rushed. You'll go into the ante room or the check-in area, the front desk area, in the personnel offices, and you will check in for your interview. They will direct you to a cork board or a board hanging on the wall, which will have all the personnel assigned to interview boards on that date, which for sergeants, I believe, is captains. And you will be asked if you have a conflict with anybody on that list. A lot of people hesitate to point out if they, you know, do have a conflict, because they feel that perhaps it'll get back to that person, it'll be held against them, that sort of thing. I will tell you again, all the way up to the rank of commander, when I asked for guidance from people bigger than me, I was told very honestly that you should make use of that challenge if it is applicable. Again, adding to your comfort level, to your security, and feeling you get a fair hearing. I will tell you now that when you do challenge somebody, you know, Captain X is on that list, and you say, I have had a prior conflict with Captain X, and so I'd like to challenge them. They will more than likely ask you to give a very brief explanation of what that conflict was. So, you know, be honest and upfront. You know, don't challenge somebody just because maybe you've heard bad things or you don't like them. But if you have had a valid issue in the past where you feel that they can't give you a fair shot or a fair hearing, make use of that challenge. You will then be pulled into an interview room. The interview is recorded. It will generally be 2 sworn personnel and a civilian from personnel, a civilian professional. I will tell you, do not discount the importance and influence of that civilian member of the board, okay? Treat them with the appropriate level of respect, be responsive to them, and speak in terminology that they will understand, okay? So limit your use of police or department jargon, and talk in plain English. At this level, quite frequently, that civilian may be even the chair of the board. You know, they may or may not. So just if there is a civilian on your board, and again, I'm not sure how they're running these panels these days, but if there's a civilian, just show them that appropriate level of respect. Generally, when you first come in, one of the first questions you will be told, we've had an opportunity to review your essay. Is there anything you would like to add, change, or clarify in your essay? The only thing I will tell you about that is, no, there's nothing I would change, is the wrong answer. Okay. Whether or not it was the best you could have done at the time, to answer in that fashion comes off a little bit arrogant and egotistical, because none of us are perfect. So before you go in, think about, if you've gone back and reviewed the material that covers that essay question, you know, and you know you did miss something, cover it. You know, in hindsight, I believe I did not cover, you know, with appropriate detail this point, or I would have liked to have emphasized this point further, or had I been given more time, I would have gone into more detail on X, Y, and Z. You know, so be sure that you are prepared to answer that question, because I can virtually guarantee that that will be one of your opening questions. Keep in mind, you know, and it's my understanding that the essay question had something to do with an OIS, and your response perhaps as the first supervisor on scene or something to that effect. And I will presume that most of you probably covered all the policy issues that you need to cover as a field supervisor, first on scene at an OIS. The welfare of your officers, the public safety statement, understanding the importance of the public safety statement, any immediate risks to the public right now, outstanding suspects, etc. I would hope that at some point you emphasize, that, the magnitude of a use of deadly force, be it with hits or not, the importance of, you having that initial role in what has to be a thorough investigation in order to maintain the confidence of the public, and to ensure that officers are acting appropriately. That sort of thing. So these are things, again, if you didn't emphasize points like that, you didn't emphasize things like maintaining trust with the public. These are things that perhaps you could consider for your, is there anything you'd like to add? So again, be ready definitely for that question. You will probably not, as has been the trend in recent years, be asked for just a general opening statement. That used to be years ago what was done. What you will probably get is, after the essay question, you will get a general question, something to the effect of, tell us how your training and experience supports or should be considered in regards to has prepared you for the position of Sergeant of Police. Okay, and that is kind of a general opening statement. So be ready for, more than likely, I can tell you probably with 90 to 95% certainty, that will probably be right after the essay question, what your opening is. Your answers should be limited to, kind of a couple minutes each. Okay. Don't allow yourself to wander. So, be prepared to say about your experience, your operational experience, any leadership experience you have, any systems experience you have, that you're ready to step up to take this leadership role, that you acknowledge the importance of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Know the role that you are pursuing. What is the role of a sergeant, specifically in this case, a field supervisor, which is where you would start in the Los Angeles Police Department. Okay. And by policy, that is to guide, mentor, train, and supervise officers in the field. So that should be part of every answer you give. Okay, so when we talk about answering a specific question, which will be posed to you, my suggestion to you is kind of to have 3 tiers in that answer. First of all, answer the question according to policy. Okay. And if this is kind of the standard questions, historically, they've asked about things like sexual harassment, about misconduct, about, so the policy is we have 0 tolerance. It opens us up to, civil liability, et cetera, et cetera. So you give the policy answer first. Then you would perhaps give the second portion of your answer would be, this is important in the role of supervisor because, okay, so where is the role of supervisor, of sergeant of police in regards to that policy? Okay, in regards specifically to the question that was answered. And then ideally, you include a third part is, here's how I've already done that job. Okay, here's how I've already instilled that in as a peer leader. Here's how I've already displayed how I meet that expectation, or I've already performed at that level. So, that's kind of a home run answer, in my mind, to a question. Again, you answer the question according to policy. You say why it's important. okay, to the position, to the department, to our role in society. And then again, the third portion is how you've already exhibited your proficiency or capability to do that. Keep in mind that many of the questions will be compound, okay? Don't hesitate to ask for them to repeat the question at any point. If you answer the question and you know you've gotten the first portion of the question, you can always ask them, could you please repeat the question again? I know there's a second part I need to address. It's not going to be held against you. If anything, they will appreciate your thoroughness, okay? But be prepared because there will be compound questions. Tell us about a time you did such and such, such and such. How did you respond to this? And what were the results? Might be a question. And I'll go into some of those in a minute, some examples. Keep in mind our role in law enforcement as public servants. Almost every question, again, for a home run, can and should be tied back to the community, okay? Most of the policies we have are an acknowledgement of us having awesome authority in society, and ensuring we don't abuse that, and maintaining trust with the community, providing service to the community, et cetera, et cetera. So most of the questions at some point when you get to that second part of that question about why it's important, probably a portion of that can or should be tied back to the community. So just keep that in mind, okay? Don't lose sight of that. That is our basic function. Now, hot topics. And there are people I'm sure on this call who can come up with other issues that you've heard about, that are talked about, that are expressed to you in roll call training, that are the subject of special orders, et cetera. But you should have a thorough understanding of what are some of the hot topics in our department, in general societal expectations of law enforcement. For instance, de-escalation, okay? You should be able to articulate de-escalation. You should be able to articulate, especially at this level, the patrol acronym, okay? You should be able to articulate your role as a sergeant in, providing, to the degree that we can, a transparent accountability to the public. Why use of force investigations are important, why administrative personnel complaint investigations are important, that sort of thing. Because as a supervisor, you are the first level of identifying and investigating these critical portions, okay? So that's part of a pseudo-transparent function to the extent that we can be, okay? If you don't have a good grounding or understanding of procedural justice, Google it, okay? Know the tenets of procedural justice. Understand, that kind of trust building aspect of law enforcement, okay? Because that is a hot point, a hot discussion point in today's society, and again, in our role. To that extent, and kind of an extension of that, if you don't know the difference between equity and equality, Google it. All right. And let me give you the best example I can come up with. And this isn't necessarily law enforcement, but this is kind of society and government. If you all recall during COVID, and I'm presuming since all of you are at the point where you're, applying and promoting to sergeant, that you were around during COVID. The government decided that the best avenue for vaccination and testing was a mass point of dispensing at Dodger Stadium. Equality was, equal access. It was a drive up. It was open to the public. Anybody could show up. It was offered for free. And that was equal access. That's equality. The problem came up with a lack of equity in that we failed, we as a government, okay, we as public servants, who was on our shoulders to provide a life-saving public service, we failed to recognize the fact that it's a drive up, but not everybody has cars. It's free and it's open, but it's open Monday through Friday during business hours. A lot of people, again, who might not have cars or might have cars, work, minimum wage jobs that require them to be there to pay for their families and put food on the table for their children Monday through Friday. And they can't take that time off work, because if they don't show up to work, they don't get paid. And had no avenue to either get to Dodger Stadium or to get the time off to get to Dodger Stadium during those hours, so that's the difference between equality and equity. Okay. Sure, we make it available and we make it free, but do we make it reachable for everybody dependent upon their unique circumstances in society? So just that's just kind of one, so you can hopefully start to see the difference between equity and equality. That is huge in procedural justice. That is huge in perception of law enforcement services to society. And again, as a sergeant of police responsible for supervising police officers in their service to the community, you got to at least have an understanding and a grounding on this, and the impact that sometimes some of the simplest things that we do can be perceived or misperceived. Okay. And you're the first line of defense in ensuring that equitable and equal public service and protecting the brand of the Los Angeles Police Department. Okay. So, and I'm sure there's probably some other hot topics out there. So, be versed on those and be ready for those to potentially come up. And if you don't work those into some of your answers or haven't had the opportunity, you've probably missed something, an opportunity in a question. So some of the topics that you will see come up, there will more than likely be some kind of a systems question or an organization question. And it will be addressed to providing you with an opportunity to give an example of, for perhaps a time as a peer leader, you had a project, an involved project. It might simply be, talk to me about the most involved project you were ever, part of, and what part did you play? How did you organize it and manage it? How did you manage your time? Maybe how did you put a team together? That kind of thing. So a kind of systems question of, how you handle, it's an opportunity for you to display how you multitask, how you time manage, how you prioritize. And again, why is this important to a supervisor? You recognize that as a supervisor, you will be handling projects on behalf of the command. You will be handling time sensitive issues. You will have to prioritize, and multitask as you handle perhaps personnel complaint investigations, as well as a use of force investigation, as well as a community meeting you might be assigned by the captain, things like that. So have in your grab bag perhaps an example or some examples of times where you've taken a peer leadership role in a project that required you to be able to show these kinds of systems or management or organizational skill sets. You will perhaps be asked, tell us about a time that you gave a public presentation. Who was it addressed to? What was the the subject matter? and what was the outcome? And again, this might be, for those of you that are slows, you can do this in your sleep. What kind of community meetings? For those of you that perhaps haven't had that opportunity, I will tell you at this level, at the sergeant level, don't be afraid to draw in other experience outside the department. If you are active, in your children's functions, in school functions for your kids, if you've been a coach, if you've had prior employment before being on the job with the police department, where you perhaps had a supervisory role, if you were in the military, at this level, all of that life experience, ideally you can draw it from the department, but don't hesitate to bring outside experience up, because that is part of your experience. It lends yourself to your skill set. It's valuable. Again, so don't hesitate. But be ready to provide an example of when you addressed a public meeting or gave a presentation, or briefed a higher authority, on a project you wanted to do, or something like that. Same kind of vein of both of those prior questions, think about, brainstorm the times that you have taken, again, peer leader or leadership roles. Okay. If you've been an assistant OIC as a P3 in a GED unit, or a vice unit, if anytime you've been in a position where you've had to take or been granted a leadership role, to put a plan together, or to run a unit or assist in running a unit, that kind of thing. You could perhaps, hold on one second, my phone's going off the hook and I know we have a SWAT call right now. Oh, in custody. Okay. You also could be asked about a conflict you've handled. Okay. And it could be an interpersonal conflict. It could be, tell us about a time you had a conflict with a peer. It could be, tell us about a time you had a difference of opinion with the supervisor. How did you handle it? And what was the outcome? I guarantee you that these questions will be, what was the outcome? And don't be afraid if the outcome wasn't in your favor. What they're looking for is level-headedness, maturity, the willingness to confront difficult subjects, and again, the maturity with which you handled it. I would not use the, I confronted a supervisor in front of everybody in roll call as an example. I would use I approached the supervisor, later on and asked if we could talk in the parking lot, or asked if I could talk to them offline or whatever, and expressed my frustration, my concerns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We talked it out, they explained their point of view. I have a better understanding now. I had not considered, it could be that you were corrected. But it's not so much the question doesn't depend necessarily on that outcome. It's how you handled the incident is what generally that conflict question will be looking for. It could be how you mediated a conflict between two others, how you took a leadership role and stepped in order to settle a conflict between two other peers and assisted them in coming to some kind of, and again, it doesn't mean they hugged and made up and sang Kumbaya. But, did you assist in handling it? It could be they walked away and agreed to disagree. But did you assist in avoiding it going farther, getting worse, creating an embarrassment for the department, etc.? Did you identify the need and have the courage to step up? Okay, is the kind of thing we're looking for there. There may be opportunities to keep in mind as a supervisor and express the importance of objectivity. Okay. Objectivity when you handle a conflict, the perception, the importance, again, drawing this back to the community, the extreme importance of you as a supervisor stepping in your role in guaranteeing, good, capable, honest, honorable public service to the community. And that objectivity or perception of objectivity that must be maintained by the department and holding our officers to that same standard. Okay. And that could be, a question that perhaps has to do with cultural differences, or being called to the scene of, that kind of a sensitive issue, or allegations of profiling or disparate treatment, those sorts of things. And we may go into things in the back of our mind, even being able to view body-worn video at the scene and knowing in your heart of hearts that officers did factually nothing wrong. By policy and law, nothing wrong. But being sensitive to the need to remain objective, being sensitive, again, getting back to that procedural justice angle and that equity versus equality, that, our members of the public come into these encounters sometimes with personal or familial historical experiences that make them, distrustful. And we need to be conscious of that. And as a supervisor, you need to be conscious of that. Expressing your understanding of that importance, your understanding of, at a level above the officers, maintaining that objectivity to provide the public with some level of some level of comfort, that they're going to get a fair hearing, that there's going to be a thorough evaluation of whatever their issue, their question, their concern, their complaint may be. And again, know your role as a sergeant. In all these questions and answers, your answers should encompass, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, should express, you should be answering it as a sergeant. Okay, here's the policy answer. Here's why it's important. As a sergeant, here's what my role in making sure that these policies are maintained, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So understand what your role as a sergeant is. And when you go back and you think about your essay, again, did you answer that from the role as a sergeant from beginning to end? Your role as a sergeant is to be the watch commander's eyes and ears in the field. So you should be at some point communicating back to your watch commander. Any concerns you have, any progress reports on probationary officers, any concerns you have, patterns you're seeing with officers who are, perhaps worthy of a little extra attention, a little more mentoring, a little more guidance, because that is your role. Again, train, mentor, guide, supervise. Your awareness of risk management issues. Okay. You should be, the department, and I'm sure you've all sat through things where the department has expressed, and I will emphasize, short of the professional, experienced law enforcement officer answering the 911 call and providing that basic emergency service, to the public, to your family. Okay. That is the bread and butter of what we do. The standard by which we do that is maintained, most importantly, first and foremost, by our frontline supervisors on the street. Okay. The credibility that they maintain, their willingness, and the manner in which they professionally, maintain that supervision, that effect on morale, that leadership role, that is critical. So you need to acknowledge and understand and express that knowledge and understanding of the importance of that role of a supervisor in the Los Angeles Police Department. You know, you are maintaining the standards of this department, you know, and holding officers accountable to that. So, you know, don't hesitate to express that. Be aware of risk management issues. Be aware, you know, your job is to ideally identify risk management issues before they become risk management issues. To be there, out and active, observing officers in the field, making minor corrections before they become a major issue. Okay. So don't hesitate to be, you know, to vocalize that, to express that understanding. Now, after they ask these series of questions, okay, of which there'll probably be, I would say 6 or 7 at least, okay. So you figure roughly 2 minutes to 3 minutes for each of those. You know, and then you'll be given the opportunity for a closing. What I will tell you from a closing, and I will tell you to have some general thoughts. You know, I would not over rehearse because you will sound rehearse. Have some bullet points that you know you want to hit this, and this. I would say be sincere. You know, if there is a heartstrings rationale for why you are a Los Angeles police officer or a police officer that you can express in 30 seconds to a minute, now is the time to do it. You know, and I will tell you, don't make something up. Because having sat on the other side of a lot of these interviews, you know, we tend to get pretty good at measuring sincerity. Okay, as opposed to just giving me a sappy story that you think I want to hear. But I would say be sincere. You know, if there is an idealism to how you came to this job, or if there is, you know, I will tell you, you know, and I forget her name, but somebody who interviewed for lieutenant in front of me once, and her closing statement talked about how she was essentially homeless and pregnant at like the age of 16, and worked her way back to earn a GED and go into public service. You know, and she was able to tie that into, you know, being able to provide that guidance and opportunity, you know, and to put herself up as an example to the younger generation, to not give up and everything else. It was, you know, like I say, it's probably been 15 years and I still remember that interview. You know, and so and I'm not saying we all have a story like that, but if there's a if you're a legacy kid, you know, and this is what you always dreamed of, you know, and you're here to continue to pass on the standards set forth for you by your mother or your father before you, or, you know, if you're the children of immigrants or whatever, if there is a heartstrings sincere story that brought you here, you know, today, to this point in your life, that expresses a commitment and a loyalty, you know, and a sense of duty or anything like that. Now that is the time at which you bring that up, is in that closing statement, because it will be powerful. The closing statement is the point at which you break out from the crowd. The board is going to hear a lot of people that express a very good understanding of what a sergeant does, show a competent package of experience that supports them becoming a supervisor. But it's that closing statement that might break you out ahead of the crowd, to show that just little extra something. So don't be afraid to draw that in. Okay. And then, you know, the only other thing I'll say, and if there's questions, I'll let Jules open it up for questions. which I will answer honestly with as much specificity as you may want to ask. As you move forward in your career, and especially once you get to the point of sergeant, you will have opportunities that will come before you to sit on the other side of the table, especially those of you who might be nervous about job interviews, about interviews like this or promotional interviews. Sit on the other side in like P3 orals. Because the more you sit on the other side and are the one giving the oral, the more comfortable you will become being the one being interviewed. The more comfortable you will become with the process. There is a certain consistency to the nature of the questions, the way an interview works, the types of questions and subjects that are asked, all the way up through at least the rank of captain. A commander, it gets a little different. But I will tell you, if you're looking to promote and want to sit on interviews, take advantage of that, because it is, I can't tell you how much that will help you in your performance on the other side of the table. So with that being said, I am an open book. Reach out to me in an email. Get on my calendar for one-on-one if you'd like. I will make myself available to anyone for any reason regarding the department, mentoring, any questions you may have. With that, Jules, I'll turn it over to you in case there are any additional questions.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Commander, for sharing your insights. And so you can either use the raise your hand function, or you could use the chat to ask a question. So I saw, let's see. So yeah, you can either raise your hand or use the chat function. So I don't see any questions quite yet, but this is your chance, everybody. Just I know that I always tell people, the test is pass fail, and then your whole score is based on your interview. So this is a good opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. Are there any questions? And Commander, I do appreciate you walking them through the whole course of the interview, because it mirrors that with your attire, making sure you check who's doing the interviews, and then going through the whole process. And I think that's very helpful, because a lot of folks, this might be their first promotional interview.
Yeah, that occurred to me. And it's a lot of people don't be afraid to have a personality. Don't be I'm not saying go in there and throw your arm up on the back of the chair and be overly relaxed. But don't be afraid to have a personality. Keep it on the appropriate side of appropriateness. But we're not looking for automatons by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm going through my notes here to see if there's anything else. And I will tell you, I walk around when I took promotional interviews. I would walk around with 4 or 5 index cards that just had some kind of grab bags on them. Again, I would have a couple conflicts. I would have a couple examples of leadership. I would have a couple, here's projects I've worked on to keep in mind, just to have in the back of my mind. And then based on the question you get, you can pick the one most appropriate. But I would suggest you have a couple of each of those, a couple projects, a couple leadership examples, a couple systems or organizational examples of things where you've organized things or created a system to track something or handled projects and things like that, because you'll find that a lot of them cross over and can be used to answer more than one question. And so you want to have that backup so that if, one question you answer it with this example, but then a couple questions later, they ask something that, oh, geez, that was the perfect answer for this question. You've at least got a backup to it, and you can throw in, well, obviously the response I gave a few minutes ago regarding this, what was a lesson I learned or that was applicable in this area. But, as far as another example, here's a secondary issue. Did I see a question pop up?
Yes, ma'am. So there's two questions in the chat. The first one was, um, you know, uh, in interviews, sometimes I'll ask a question about your personal package and like if you had a chance to review it. And so, what are some of the types of questions they would ask related to that?
Yeah, and I'm actually writing that down on my notes for next time I do a presentation like this. That's very good. And you're absolutely correct. They frequently have been known to ask fairly early in the interview. We've had an opportunity to review your personnel package. They could ask, I've seen them ask a couple different questions. I've seen them ask, what in your personnel package are you most proud of? Okay. I've heard them ask, is there anything in your personnel package you would like to change? Or perhaps it might be something, is there anything you'd like to highlight or something like that? Kind of along the same lines as most proud of. I will tell you right now, there is no wrong answer to this question. Okay. And I have heard the gamut. I have heard people point out they're most proud of Medal of Valor. Okay. I have heard they're most proud, and they will pick a seemingly insignificant thing, of a singular commendation or a citizen's letter I got when I did this. And it perhaps in the scope of things seems somewhat insignificant, but they're very proud of the fact that, that they touch somebody's life positively. And that's what the job is all, and these are some of the answers I've been given that touched me, that again, we get back to that kind of sincerity thing. If you can answer these things sincerely, and that truly is, that's a great answer to that question. That one, 5 years ago, that one citizen's letter or that one interaction you had, you could even say it's not in my package, but during this assignment, I had this experience and it was profound to me. Or it gave me this opportunity to change or have a positive impact on somebody's life. I have, in regards to anything you would change, I have had people come right out and address a 128, okay, and address a mistake I made. Not a problem. If you do have, one of those kind of speed bumps in your package where you maybe took a hit, it's important for you to show what you learned from it. If you're going to address it, and I have had people even in their closing statement say, the elephant in the room is, I acknowledge, as you review my package, I took a 10-day hit, I took a 15-day hit, I took a 5-day hit for X. It was 7 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. And here's what I learned from that experience. I was young, I was immature, and I made a self-centered mistake. And here's how I've learned from it. I've adjusted from it. And here's what I have to offer as a sergeant. I could identify somebody who's going down that same path. And I, as a sergeant with that experience, can maybe mentor and guide others and keep them from making the same mistake that I made. And that is an answer that was given to me by somebody, in that regards. So, and it was outstanding. It was an excellent answer. So if you do have something like that and you're going to address it, or you get asked to address it, my suggestion would be able to sincerely answer it in that fashion. That you acknowledge the accountability, your role in society, the importance of that, maintaining trust with the community, and that at that point in your life, you tripped and fell and you failed in that regard. And here's how you've learned and corrected it and grown more mature from it. I have had people answer the what I would change question with, if you look through my package, you know, I've never, and this was more at the lieutenant's role, but just to give you an example, I've never been a case carrying detective. However, I believe I've compensated for that because I've assisted in these fashions, or I've tried to expose myself in these ways. Or I was, however, you know, assisted with vice investigations, or I assisted GED detectives in detectives investigations in the, you know, so if you are going to point out something you would change, my suggestion for you would be, you know, how you've learned from it, how you've come, yes, you would have liked to have had this experience, but here's how I've tried to compensate for that. Okay. So don't, I guess my point is, don't point out a glaring or make something into a glaring omission without pointing out how, however, here's how I've compensated for that. Okay. But yes, I would, that's a very good point. Very good question. I would be ready for the, you know, what are you most proud of? Or they don't usually say, you know, what are you ashamed of or something. They'll ask you, is there anything you would change? Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And then we have two more questions. One is, if you have already answered a two-part question and asked for the second part, not realizing you inadvertently answered it, how should you end that question? Will the board tell you you covered the second part already?
I don't think the board will say, no, you've already answered it. Now, if I have been in boards where people clearly are floundering and they just keep talking. And there does come a point sometimes where a board has had to prompt people that we need to move on, you know. So that's why I say you need to kind of, you know, organize your answers with those 3 points. Be concise, be professional, be articulate, you know, but, you know, don't allow yourself to wander and just fill empty space. I would couch your, when you are kind of that uncertain point, you know, and you're not sure if you answered it, you can simply say, I believe I've answered the question, but could you please repeat it just so I could be sure? And then allow them to answer the question again. And then if that is, yes, I do believe I've answered both parts of those questions. Thank you. You know, and that can be it. It can be as respectful as that. You know, it's, and again, if you're projecting an air of, I want to ensure I've been thorough, you know, I think I have, but I want to be certain, that's fine. That's, again, respect from me as a board member in your thoroughness, in your wanting to be certain. I have no issue with that.
Great, ma'am. And then there's another question regarding, regarding de-escalation. If I'm currently assigned inside, would it be better to answer the question with a patrol or field scenario because of the field sergeant role? Or could a community-based de-escalation answer be appropriate as well?
I think they would both be appropriate. And again, you're answering the policy, okay? You're answering why it's important and the sergeant's role, okay? And my experience, you know, just recently, for example, you know, and if you're pulling that up because this is something you experienced 2 weeks ago, you know, great, you know, or something like that, that is your experience. But ideally, because you've covered the policy answer and why it's important, probably the why it's important would cover the patrol aspect of de-escalation. You know, I think to that point, you can sell yourself as very well-rounded because you're saying, you know, in day-to-day interactions, police officers deal with conflict, et cetera, verbal de-escalation, and then of course, our requirements to use the minimal amount of force to de-escalate or keep a situation from escalating, you know, our presence in the field, et cetera. You've answered that policy questions and why it's important. From an administrative point of view, presumably, you also have some responsibility on behalf of commands for that administrative insight, okay? And that you've kind of, there are roles administratively that our police officers have that are pseudo supervisory roles, where you are almost a proxy of a supervisor, where you are reviewing things. And, obviously that's anybody here that's at force investigation or critical incident response or any of those, or if you've been an adjutant or worked in an area office on projects, or if you're in the SLO and CRO office handling, community issues where, people are upset at the police. They saw something on TV or on social media yesterday. The LAPD is the enemy, where you are de-escalating, safeguarding the brand of the LAPD, doing so professionally, explaining officers' roles. Absolutely that kind of brings it full circle. You might actually have an experience that, others who have the credibility and the wealth of experience in patrol, you might have that little extra, added extra experience. So I would say that could be outstanding.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. That was the last question in the chat. I'm going to give a couple more minutes. Any last save rounds, any additional questions? We have a couple more minutes left, but I love the fact that we're going to be on time, which is great. But yeah, thank you so much, Commander, for your insight. And we will make this recording available. I know career development is here. They'll make sure it's made available as well. But with that, any more questions? I'm going to give a couple seconds. Don't see anything. Thank you all so much for joining. And good luck on your interviews, whatever they may be, but specifically for the sergeant's interviews. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Commander, for being our MVP. And I'm just going to say it, let's go Dodgers. So
there we go. Right. Sweep, sweep.
Go.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to me, guys. I'm not on the sergeant's boards, so I'm an open book. I can talk to you right up to 5 minutes before you're walking in. Ideally, you're having a drink of water and trying to relax 5 minutes before you walk in, but feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Commander. And Sergeant Kwan, do you have anything that you want to share, or you're good to go?
No, I mean, the only thing would be, like the commander said, a lot of people who have, especially taking the interviews in the past, expect most people to at least give the vanilla answer to say. So your examples that are relatable, relevant, and sincere may be that icing on the cake that'll get you that extra point and make you stand out, because the board will be listening to, again, vanilla answers day in and day out. So those examples will be critical for you.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, be safe and good luck. And we'll be in touch with future career development seminars. So thank you so much. All right. Take care, everybody. Be safe.